Karma. All right, Karma is a German Shepherd. She has a total of 154 training hours with her handler. They deployed 24 times this year for 12 alerts. 37 drug charges came from those deployments. 23.5 grams of methamphetamine, 8 grams of marijuana, 1.85 grams of heroin, 11 dosage units of prescription pills, and $351 in United States currency. And again, this is a collaborative amount from both our stops and assisting other agencies. Canine Roscoe. Roscoe's a bloodhound. He was donated from the state of Virginia, from DOC over there. And he's trained. We just got Brannick through school in August, September, I think it was. So he's been deployed 4 times, and the types of missions that team had was 2 missing persons with health conditions, and a wanted person for larceny of a motor vehicle, and attempted kidnapping, and for a separate stabbing that was not included in the previous SRT stats. So this would be a different one. So. School resource officers, of course, they're assisting school staff daily, providing school safety checks daily. They're providing parking lot safety checks daily. They're assisting students on a daily basis with a variety of issues, and on average, an SRO will make approximately 4,500 steps during their day. I think I probably need to be doing some of that walking as well. But we also have them. They're very interactive with the students and the staff. It's been a great working relationship with our schools. We share a lot of information back and forth. Also, we have some SROs that took on additional coaching jobs with the schools, more interaction. I think it's just a big bonus. Our detention center. So our detention center consists currently of 2 dorms and 9 isolation cells. The local dorm contains 10 cells that open into a day room. Each of the 10 cells will hold 2 inmates for a total of 20. The Fed dorm is an open setting with 15 bunk beds, all completely open, for a total of 30. So total capacity at max capacity would be 59. Now ideally we don't ever want to be there. Those 9 isolation cells have to be set aside for now COVID, and also for the guys that just don't play well with others, and we have those. So, or for some type of punishment if they've done something to violate rules or regulations, we have to have some type of punishment. Detention statistics. So total male inmates booked this year was 249. That of course is low from 2019. But a slight increase from 2020, I believe. Average daily male population for the year was 22 inmates for the total year. Now, I've talked to you guys some, in person on the phone about our inmate population, and first of all, I don't work in the detention center, but I can't look at our center on a day-to-day basis, because there's so many unknown factors with it. Today we may have, hypothetically, 2 that comes in, 1 of them goes home. We may have 2 that comes in and both go home. We may have none that comes in and 3 go home. You never know how it's going to be. Home or prison. I know in December, late November, early December, we had like 2 van loads that went to DOC. Just all at once, and I mean, that just drops your numbers. And again, as our stats have shown, our numbers are low. Our crime has been lower since 2019. There has been some things that trended down. Now we are starting to trend back up, and I believe we'll end up, unfortunately, back to our previous numbers or even higher eventually. But COVID definitely has took a toll on us. So back up one more time. Again, you can see during the wintertime as our call volume, it reflects essentially the same as our call volume. 19 was our average last January, 19 February, 18 in March, and then it starts trending up. So May, June, July, August, September, and October, our average run between 25 and 24. So it's 25, 25, 24, 24, back up to 20, 25, 25. November dropped 5. And then December, our average was 18. So it definitely dropped. Females booked this year. One more thing to mention on the males. So there is some unaccounted for males in those numbers at times because they are placed in other facilities. We may have them. We may have a situation to where they're co-conspirators with another person, and we can't separate them in a way that would keep them from communicating. And we got to do things like that to ensure successful prosecutions and fair prosecutions. So those are things to consider. Also, if it would be a crime against a deputy, we don't want any view of. We want to be transparent. So if we keep them out of our facilities for those types of reasons, specialty purposes and reasons, we will trade or have another county to house those for us. Females this year, we booked a total of 66 for an average daily female population of 6. With females, of course, you can see the averages jumping up and down, but obviously consistently average of 6. March was a high month, probably because of a Superior Court setting in the month of March. And then when the number dropped in April, it's because we were housing them until they were ready for them in DOC, and then that number dropped significantly there. With females, there's a lot of transportation involved with that, and I'll explain a little bit more to that whenever we get to transportation, but 66 total and an average of 6. Transportation. We are on the road an unbelievable amount for a lot of different reasons. One, we house a few feds right now. Those require transportation to Charlotte or to other facilities, whether we are going and picking them up from another facility and bringing them here, or for some reason they have made a request for us to transfer that inmate to another facility. So that requires a lot of driving up and down the highways. But our females is probably the largest driving force in this. We have to house our females now because of COVID mainly in counties such as Stokes County. You can't get to Danbury from here. In counties such as Avery County, I know we have a few there now. We have housed them in Catawba. I think we have some there now. Yadkin, Ash is where we try to be. That don't always work out for us, and we have a good relationship with Ash, and they try to keep all that they can for us. But sometimes, because of COVID, because they don't have isolation cells available for our females, we have to start reaching out. So Watauga is another one that we use, but our two farthest is Stokes and Avery, and both of those counties sometimes can get several of ours, at one time. So when you have, a female needing to come to court on this date, and you just go up and pick up one, and then the next week you got another one that ends up there, it can generate a lot of back and forth between all these counties. It's also a big strain on our manpower. On a Tuesday, on a court Tuesday, when you have 2 bailiffs sitting in the courtroom, you have 1 deputy at the door, you have 2 or 3 deputies going to various counties, because you can't go to Stokes and Avery at the same time. So you're sending multiple units to all these counties. And then if you happen to have one in Caldwell County at the same time, then you got 3 different groups of, so you can see pretty quick on an office the size of ours. Plus, we still got to maintain coverage of the county. So we're going all these different directions on the same day at the same time. It wears us thin from time to time. We totaled 97,550 miles for the year, and we averaged 8,129 miles each month. Our highest month was July for 14,532 miles. That's a lot of time on the road. DOC, an additional thing with this, DOC had stopped running the buses. So now we've been hauling loads we went to Tabor City 2 or 3 times. It's not, JC said when he got down there to the prison, 9 miles to Myrtle Beach was one of the signs that he seen. 9 miles to North Myrtle Beach. It's a haul. Our communication center, total calls for service received this year was 13,925. Of course, it reflects the same as everything else. That's trended down from 19, but increased from 20. This does not include telephone calls that are received from non-emergency lines or general telephone calls with simple questions. So there's no way really to accurately record those. I wish we could. So in percentages, of course, we consistently carry the lion's share of calls just by nature, I guess, at 42% of all the calls. So again, that's 7,323 calls that's requiring some type of a law enforcement type response or even a self-generated traffic stop. So EMS's calls has really jumped this year from last year, or they may have been higher the last 2 years, and I guess it would make sense. At 3,677 is the number that I received. The town police had 2,565 calls. The rescue squad, 1,516 calls. And all the fire departments collectively had 2,322 calls. And those are the numbers that I received from the dispatch center. Any questions on those? Okay. Calls by month. So we've done a breakdown of the 13,925 calls. That is an average of 38 calls per day. And again, that's the ones that we can account for, not the ones that we can't account for. And in their current situation, they're having to deal with foot traffic into the sheriff's office lobby of, I want to see the magistrate. I've got a question I need to speak to a deputy about. I got this, I got that, I need a pistol purchase permit. So all these other things are going into, or they're dealing with, that is not accounted for in no way, shape, form, or fashion right here. Highest number, August, 1,439 calls for service. Our Victim Services Unit, again, this is a 100% grant-funded unit that consists of two staff members. We have Lloyd Cuevas, and the supervisor would be Lee Cornett. They logged 213 crisis calls this year. They assisted 242 total victims. Now, when they're assisting these folks, it can be in numerous capacities. It can be that it can be someone that needs to seek treatment for some type of issue that they are having as a result of being a victim of a domestic violence issue, sexual assault issue, stalking, whatever the case may be. They may need assistance finding shelter. They may need assistance in court. They actually go to court with these victims and explain what is happening. They are kind of an assistant liaison with the district attorney's office, who has their own person that assists victims as well. So they all just collaboratively work together. I know that I was in Lee's office the other day, and she was filling out a victim impact form to help, victim compensation form to submit to the state, because, you know, some of these forms are tough, and they're written in lawyer language many times, and it's hard for, you know, the lay citizen to be able to fill some of this stuff out. So in DV primary, so primary would be the person that received a direct assault or was the direct victim of some type of a crime. So there's 144 of those. So there was 68 secondary victims, which could be a sibling, a child, whatever that case may be. So if it's a lady that was impacted by domestic violence and she's got 2 kids, then that's what that number could be. Sexual assault victims, primary was 18, and the secondary victims was 6. Stalking was 3, and secondary stalking was 3. So you can see the breakdown there. Most everything is domestic violence related for those folks. Courthouse visitors this year was a total of 14,040. That is an average of 270 visitors a week. And our highest month was March. Again, typically you'll see that in our months where we have Superior Court. You're generating all of those folks that have to come in for jury duty, things like that. So, public assistance by our courthouse deputy was 955. They confiscated 47 weapons. Vast majority is going to be pocket knives. I didn't ask specifically, but I would know if it would have been anything more than that. Verbal warnings, 111. There was no arrest this year as a result of coming through the front door of the courthouse. Sometimes we have that in years where somebody will come through the front door. They didn't know, or the deputy will know that they have a warrant or something, so go ahead and get them right there. Of course, security checks are performed every day. Most of the time, this deputy that sits at the front door will search the courthouse, check the courthouse first thing in the mornings, check all the doors, and then that's the last thing he does in the evening before he leaves. Finance, this is new this year. We just added this year to kind of give you an idea of where we are and how we are spending our funds. So this is the 2020-2021 budget. I just want to clarify that for everybody because we are halfway through this year. So that particular budget, we were budgeted a total of $2,523,520. We expended of that $2,271,966. So we reverted $251,554 of that budget. They vary each year. All right, so our grant funds. So here's the breakdown of the grant funds versus the sheriff's office portion of that last budget that you've seen. Back up one time there, Drew. Yeah, I didn't touch on the breakdown. So of the $2,523,520, 34% of it, or $780,925, was spent in the detention center. And then the sheriff's office side of it, for the law enforcement and the various other things that we have, was $1,491,042, and 66% of that. Okay. All right, so the 2021 budget year expenditures out of the sheriff's office was, again, the $1,491,042. Of that $1,491,042, $273,926 of that money was grant dollars that returned to the county. There's a $100,000 SRO reimbursement by the state. There's $10,894 of Wilkes Community College that's reimbursed to us for the use of an SRO. So county tax dollars was $1,106,222. You take out all the other things. Okay. Expenses by our services. Our patrol division is the largest division that we have. It is the prevention and it's the prevention arm of the office many times, in numerous reasons. Self-generated traffic stops, the visibility of our folks in the community. Visibility prevents crime. It's a proven fact. If somebody's getting ready to break into a house and they see a brown car go by with sheriff's office on the side, they're much less likely to decide to go ahead and do that. So it's 45% of our total budget. Investigations, 21%. SROs was 15% of it. The courts was 5% of it. Administration's about 6% of it, and then victim services was 8% of it. Okay. January through December of this year, this is our revenues this year, was $263,087 total. The breakdown of that is $37,343 would be in sheriff's office fees, which would be concealed carries, pistol purchase permit, fingerprinting, so on and so forth. Detention fees, that could be clerk of court fees for, requiring somebody to pay for staying in the jail once sentencing, $63,854. Also pay-tail home waves, some of those things, commissary, things like that. The county makes a little money back on that stuff. We had $11,211 in asset forfeiture. And January 1st through December, inmate housing, this would be state inmates that we were housing and federal inmates that we were housing, for a gross, not a net, but a gross of $150,679. So again, a total was $263,087. Okay. So the percentages of the county budget. So I guess y'all have a total $21 million budget for last year. Is that counting, is that correct?
Can do is not at this point, because
Okay.
I assume that's all funds.
That's all funds.
Okay.
Because I don't know how to break them down.
Then I would take your word for it and say yes.
I pulled, best I remember, I pulled that number from the website. I think is how I got it. But I don't know what that includes, because I'm not a commissioner and I'm certainly not a county manager. So that may be all assets, debts. I don't know how y'all count that number. But so of that, we were 11.98% of it. Regional averages is about 15%. Again, I just went to these various places and pulled a top number, and then tried to get the sheriff's office and detention center specifically numbers. So that's the averages throughout the region, as the best as I could figure it. So the average would be 15.65%. And then the closest one to us was 12.69% with Wilkes County. So, we try to just be as mindful as possible, and I'll touch on that a little bit later in some of the things that we're doing. Highest one was 17.14%. You're good. You're fine. I just wanted to make that statement. All right. So the 4-year average revert of our county funds has ended up being an average of $234,384, or $382. Sorry. So last year, again, we reverted $251,554. 20 was a big number, $420,024. There's reasons behind that number, because that's not a sustainable number for us to revert. There's two things. One, COVID hit through 20, and two, that's when the beginnings of the county financial crisis was, and we had some conversations during those times to try to revert as much as possible throughout that. 19 was 174,985, and then 18 was 90,965. Our goals. So goals in process. Sheriff's Office staff, along with the county employees, are currently in the process and making preparations of moving the 911 communication center to this building. We've been working with the manager's office, emergency management, David, various other folks, and trying to get some preparations in order to make that move. I'm excited about it. I think it'll be a positive move for everyone. The Yellow Dot program, the sheriff and Lee have been working on this. This program is designed to notify first responders of valuable personal information a victim would have in a designated area or location. First responders would know this information by the visible yellow dot placed on a vehicle. Court-certified bilingual interpreter to serve crime victims. That'll be Lloyd Cuevas is currently trying to make headway toward getting his court-certified bilingual interpreter licensure, I guess. Upfit the SRT with combat medical supplies. That's a goal in process as well. Future goals: implement additional FTO training for the jail. There are schools out there that we can send current certified staff to that has some time on the job. We can get them certified to be field training officers to work with new hires to ensure that we have the best quality detention staff that we can have and make sure that they're doing their job correctly. Continue to add new and additional training for all staff. We're trying to get staff headed toward intermediate and advanced law enforcement certificates. Training makes quality staff. It is a known fact that if you have highly qualified and capable and competent staff, liabilities reduce, services are better performed, timelines are met better. It's just a win-win for everybody. Local media, another goal that the sheriff's wanting to do is a local media push from the sheriff's desk. It's a public service announcement that he's wanting to try to start each and every month. They're wanting to add a Phase 2 program in the high school for our drug prevention stuff. It's a lot like DARE. It's called Keeping It Real, but there is a high school process with that. So if they can get it in the elementary schools as they are and then get it reiterated to them at that certain age in high school, I think maybe it would help deter or prevent. Transition to the full-time use of the 800 megahertz radio system for the sheriff's office staff only at this time. I can thank specifically all 5 of you, Drew and Michael, for making this stuff happen. I had a lot of conversation with Michael through the past few months about our radios, about some other equipment needs that we had, and he has stepped up, willing to help us make that work, and you guys approved it all, and we're thankful for that. Mobile Victim Service Unit, it's a confidential setting and meeting at an event. Of course, for this to happen, this is a future goal, and for this to happen, it would require grant funds, but there is funding available for these types of things. It could be used for several things, you know. Just a mobile response unit alone would be helpful to have. Okay. All right, more for our community. The sheriff is all in on doing community things. He's very involved with community works and helping out citizens in those aspects. So some of the things that he's very big on doing would be the canned food drive, the Sheriff's Safety Day, and the Sheriff's Christmas for Kids, or the Run for a Claws program. So in the food drive this year, they held that on April the 15th, and so him, along with Lloyd, and 3 of the deputies, I think that's Deputy Brandon Martin, Sergeant Curtis Glass, and Deputy Josh Braxton, that's in the video or picture there with him. It was held on April 15th in the PVA at Food Line, or the parking lot at Food Line. 9 shopping carts were filled, and $470 in cash was donated. This all went to benefit the food closet. The Sheriff's Safety Day, he held his 7th annual event this year. There was approximately 350 people that attended. That was, I think, the largest turnout that I'm aware of. Attractions included him on his wagon, or him on his mower with his wagon train, the driver safety program. Food was provided by the Sheriff's Office and by Allegheny Health. School supply was passed out and donated both by the Methodist Church and Cornerstone Church. School bus safety provided by Allegheny County Public Schools. They were there with a bus and talked to kids about that. Tumbler, it's a car seat safety thing that has a cab of a vehicle with someone in, or with a a stuffed animal or some type of sort of something in it that is portrayed as a person. So they spin this thing without a seatbelt on, and then they spin it with a seatbelt on, and it shows the differences in the safety of having a belt on. Car safety, CPR for kids, provided by EMS, and pet safety. Glade Creek Veterinary Clinic was there for that. Child activities was put on by the Wellness Center, the Pregnancy Center, Parent to Parent, and the CAC, local CAC. The Sheriff's Run for a Clause. This was the 3rd annual 5K. The event's purpose is to financially support the Sheriff's Christmas for Kids campaign, and this year's event by participants and sponsors totaled $20,391.79. That's a pretty good fundraiser. The 3rd annual event purchased gifts for children in Allegheny County, and approximately 500 children pre-K through 3rd grade received gifts. I think it was actually 600. I had not updated it because he ended up doing, I think, some of the preschools or some of the schools or some of the daycares outside of the school system. So I think it ended up being over 600 kids. In closing, doing a lot and trying to keep our physical responsibility in mind. As the previous slides have shown, the sheriff is always thinking of ways to conserve while maintaining a courteous, professional, and well-trained and equipped staff that is efficient in performing their duties. There is a careful balance in weighing costs versus services. Our fundamental duty is to support, maintain, and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of North Carolina, and the general statutes that are not inconsistent therewith. We believe the statistics show that it has been a busy and successful year in our endeavors of making Allegheny County a safe environment for its citizens and visitors. A few words about the staff. The staff of the Allegheny County Sheriff's Office is second to none. Law enforcement continues to rapidly evolve. There are new court decisions and case laws handed down by the United States Supreme Court, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and state courts on a daily basis. Deputies and detention officers are tasked with a very difficult job that is both physically and mentally challenging. On any given day, they have to be a lawyer, psychologist, peacemaker, gentleman, mediator, caregiver, social worker, and a warrior. They have to be confident and intelligent to make split-second decisions that could likely take a court months to decide on. These ladies and gentlemen joined this profession because they have respect for the rule of law and a strong desire for service to this great county and the citizens therein. Commissioners back in the blue. The sheriff and all the staff would like to commend this board for being the most supportive board of law enforcement that the sheriff's office has had the pleasure of working with. In recent years, law enforcement has become a very politicized profession. We are grateful for the direct line of communication and your positive and timely response to the needs that arise in our endeavors of providing the most efficient services we can to the citizens of Allegheny County. In closing, I wish to close by thanking the communities throughout Allegheny County for their support for our Sheriff's Office. It truly takes a group effort between our citizens, staff, and local government to help us accomplish our mission of maintaining the quality of life we enjoy here in Allegheny County. And that was written by the Sheriff, Brian Maines. Any questions on anything? I know we covered a lot of stuff.
That's a good report. I got a couple of questions here. The school, you all go to school and take your dog. Does that occur every year?
We do. We work closely with the SROs who are in direct communication with various principals, powers that be within the system, and we go at various times throughout the year.
SROs, that's proven to be a good environment for the kids, more than just the protection. That's a good interaction with the kids. Good to hear that some of them's doing some coaching. Yeah, very active. All of our SROs have been really active within the schools. They, the guys that's in them really enjoy doing it. It's a calling for them to be there. They can, it's amazing to see some of them. They can really be down on the level that they need to be down on, but then immediately be up if they need to be. It's a,
kindergarten cop. I don't know if y'all have seen that or not, but I mean, one minute you're down here, but the next minute you may have somebody crossing school grounds. We have had that in the past and had to deal with that stuff. So they wear a lot of hats, as do everybody in law enforcement, generally speaking. But they're doing a great job.
Any statistics out there of talking about what you can expect in the crime wave after COVID?
I don't think that I don't have any specific statistics that I could sit here and hang my hat on. I have a feeling that way it was trending prior to COVID, I unfortunately feel like it could likely start trending that way again. I mean, we're proactive, and the guys are always out. We set these vehicles up to be an office. They are a rolling office going down the road. There's minimal things that they need at the office, short of making an arrest or stopping by for something specifically. These guys are out there. They are out there and moving. So the visibility within the communities obviously helps. And
SWAT team out there gets a good bit of work out too, don't they?
they're very active. That is something that we hope and pray that we rarely have to use, but it's something nowadays, unfortunately, we have to have. I mean, it is, these guys know things and are trained things to make it safer to apprehend somebody. And obviously, the goal of that team is to preserve life, limb, property. And we train that way. So,
questions, comments?
Just a couple. Can we get a copy of your point?
Sure, I can email it. I can email it too. Drew, if you want to download it, you can send it.
And you said that you're averaging about 22 meals a day right now?
Our average was 22 inmates a month for the total year.
Do you see that staying level, going down, going up?
Well, when I talk about increases, I'm talking about long-term increases. I don't know what the short-term holds for us. It's something you just don't know about. Do I anticipate business going more back to normal? I do anticipate that it's going to go back to normal. But again, we take proactive approaches, so we try to anticipate. We don't want to underestimate and be caught short. So, we are always anticipating for, we hope for the best, but we plan for the worst. I think that's just the way we have to be in order to provide the services that we provide.
And one final question. You had organizations that repaid the sheriff's department for some services. You didn't list the hospital. Do they still reimburse you for some time?
I think that went away that I'm aware of. We've not been billing, and when I pulled that revenue line, I didn't see anything in it. So at this moment, I don't believe they're reimbursing.
But you do spend time there.
Oh, we certainly spend time there, yes. Yes, sir. Can I add one more thing to the inmate thing? There's a lot of variables in inmate housing. You can see the numbers. Drew, can you back that up to the number of arrests versus the number of criminal papers and arrests versus the average? And again, these are low years. We've had years that's much higher. We booked 250 inmates this year, but our average population is only 22. So look at the amount of inmates that came in this year versus the actual amount of inmates that you're keeping. There is so many variables involved in that. Again, bonds. Bonds are fairly low, generally speaking. People have the means to get out. Bondsmen are seemingly more proactive about getting people out now than I have seen in the past. People just tend to get out without staying very long. So with the amount of folks that you bring in versus the average, it's relatively low. So
that kind of touches on one of my questions regarding the work that you're doing and the charges. For one number I put down here is 234 drug charges. How many of those are recurring? I mean, how many people would that actually be for? And I'm not asking for that number. I'm just saying. And these offenses and these charges that are made, and we all know that that law enforcement presence in the community can be a deterrent. But as these crimes are committed and your work is done and the statistics are showing that, and then these end up through the court systems and almost like a revolving door, what is that? How is that locally? I mean, we hear things, from infotainment, otherwise known as news media, regarding a lot of this stuff, but then you see a lot of evidence. I don't know, I'm not involved any at all with anything regarding this, but I'd be curious, how is it locally? But more importantly, what does that do for the sheriff and his staff and their morale of just dealing with the stuff over and over and over? And I know there's not an answer to that, but I am curious as to how it is locally, how you're dealing with that.
yeah, I wouldn't have numbers like you're saying, but I can just tell you from observation and from being in it. I guess between residents and visitors, we're hovering in that 10 to 12,000 on any given day between the people that live here and the people that come here for various things. So of that number, it's a very low portion of the actual people in this county that we're dealing with. But it ends up being that portion of people constantly. They come in, they stay for a period of time, they leave. They either leave on probation, they leave time served, they leave to go to prison for a short stint, and then it's right back, and then we repeat that process over again and over and over and over again.
There's a pretty high recidivism rate
It appears to me. I've not broke down the numbers, but it certainly appears that way.
In one place, when we were talking about the detention numbers, and you were talking about it being low and kind of the reasons behind it, and your thought is, or your thinking is, that it will go back up. But will it, if things don't change, with our court system? I mean, I think a lot of why it's low is because of how it's being dealt with. And I'm not in their shoes, and I don't know what they're dealing with either, and I wouldn't want to be in their shoes, and I respect anybody that's trying to muddle through this environment that we're in. But if things don't go back to some sense of normalcy from what you're previously used to in law enforcement, then it may not go back up. I mean, there may be this continual cycle. And then on the drug-related stuff, I was excited to hear one of the future goals, and hopefully it can come to fruition sooner, is the high school drug prevention, because that's really, I think, an area of opportunity that we have here in the county, is some kind of a program. I know you've been working in the lower schools and the higher schools, and we also need, I think, a good program for adults. I mean, there's help out there, but there's not really a good program. And I've been through the Association of County Commissioners. I know some counties across the state have really put together a program to where essentially if someone on their own wanted to walk in and just give up and say, I am tired of being tired and sick, and and I need help, can you help me? Then there's a program then that would help that person who is willing and wanting to come in and get that help. Whereas, I mean, we have tools and things in place for folks in the community, but it's very hard to find it, especially if you're on drugs and strung out and your life is a mess. And a lot of those people end up falling in the cracks, and you know, then they're in your all's radar and things of that nature. So I don't know what it would take for that to come to fruition, but I would love for that conversation to continue. And the last note I will make is on your calls, the call center, almost 14,000 calls, and this touches on our 911 funding is based on calls. How many calls beyond that are you getting on regular lines? You don't have a clue because we don't track it. But this is kind of a plea to the public. These calls really would behoove the county a lot better if all of the calls would come in through 911. I know that's tough. I've made some of the individual calls. Of course, you know, having some numbers, phone numbers and contacts. But if it's a public crisis or a need for the sheriff's office, I would encourage the public to really use that 911 number, because funding is tied to how many calls we get through there, and that would actually help the county overall as well. So I just wanted to make those points. Thank you for a great report.
A couple of things on what you just said. One, with the help, the mental health help rather. Totally agree. I did want to let you guys know, and I don't know that we really push this out there like we should, but we do. We work with Daymark, and everyone that's in custody at the sheriff's office has the availability, and they do come very frequently to the jail for substance abuse, counseling assistance, and things like that. So the folks that's in there do get access and use it to try to help with their addictions and things. So the other thing, to your point with 911, great statement there. We have looked at some numbers. All of us have talked about some of this at various times. And, you know, I really think the citizens in this county, you know, we have a modest group of folks that are citizens that just feel like, well, I don't want to bother somebody. I don't think that my emergency or my level of need raises to what somebody else down the road may need. And I don't want to tie up that important phone line for this little thing that I've got going on. But it really would help if everyone that needed assistance like that, or some type of assistance, would call on those 911 lines if they're needing a response off something. You know, we've had folks that was complaining of chest pains and felt like that they were having a heart attack that wouldn't call the 911 phone, would call 4455. So that number, when the state pulls those numbers through ECATS, that emergency call did not exist to them. And therefore, we're still providing that service to this person, but when the state doesn't see it, the state's not going to up our 911 dollars or things of that nature. So it would be a good thing for folks to go ahead and say, well, you know, I am important enough, my needs are important enough that I need to call 911 for this, you know. So we would encourage people to use those numbers. That's what it's there for.
Thank you. Going back to the IVCs, I know we had conversation with the hospital and about that situation, and they really stepped up, and if I remember correctly, they call it the Sitters program, where they hire for nonviolent to help, and that's helped you guys a good bit, hasn't it?
It's helped some. I don't think they have the sitters available that they would probably like to, and that we would like for them to have as well. But those work in cases where someone is under IVC and nonviolent. And so, yeah, there has been some times when that occurred. Anytime that there's a potential for violence, we're there. the whole time, you know. And before we leave for any of them, we have a memorandum of understanding or agreement with the hospital that we wrote together, I guess jointly and jointly agreed to, that says that we will stay for every commitment for a period of time, and then if there's a time to where both the hospital and the sheriff's office agree that it is safe to leave them, under the understanding that we respond immediately if they need it in any circumstance, that we will do so. We've both agreed to a little agreement or understanding there, and that's worked out well. It's got us out of the hospital sometime anyway, so.
Any other questions? Appreciate the,
Thank you all.
thank you.
Chairman, would you?
Chair calls for a 10-minute recess. Call the meeting back to order. No, we ain't hardly ready either. April's not. All right, move on up to let Eric come up and give his talk while we're waiting on April. General business. Eric Hampton.
Morning, everyone. In your packet, I have a shared personnel mutual aid agreement with soil and water conservation districts. This is something the state's wanting to get in black and white. We've been doing it for years. This is just pretty much stating, had all the storms down Haywood County. It's kind of putting it in black and white where we can go down, help those guys out, help the federal side out, and everything. Me and Michael have talked about it. He said he's fine with it, just want to be transparent with it. Putting it in black and white, it's pretty much stating that each county's liable for their own personnel as far as insurance, pay, all that good stuff, workman's comp. And it also states, if there's the resources, for instance, I didn't get to go to Haywood. We were down a staff member in office, so I didn't go. So if the resources are available, we'll go. If not, we stay put where we're at. Get a storm coming in here, have a lot of flood and a lot of damage. Be nice to be able to have other districts come up and help us. So like I said, it's just a mutual aid agreement. You guys can look it over. Michael, I don't know do you need a motion on it?
If that would be appropriate, that would authorize the signature.
Like I said, it's holding it's going to hold Alleghany. Not going to hold anything against us if we go to help another county.
Anybody have any questions about this?
I'll make a motion. Agreement.
A motion here, a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Not all in favor? You're good with it. All in favor, raise your hand. 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. I got one other thing. I don't have it on the agenda. Just want to let you guys know that as far as the Veterans Park stream restoration, we were awarded the CCAP grant, and we're having a meeting later this month, I think next week. Hopefully I'll be back for you next month, give you a total budget and complete update on it. Thank you.
Financial update, Ms. April Hand.
Apologize, I was a minute getting back, so
No problem.
had to take a phone call real quick. I do have a report I need to pass out. That's okay. This is your monthly financial update. Year-to-date revenue, $13,433,092. Year-to-date expenditures, $9,142,597. And then the approved general fund budget, $611,637. Year-to-date revenue represents about 76% of that total budget. Year-to-date expenditures represents about 52% of the total budget, and we're about 54.2% into this year's budget. Bank balance as of today, $14,345,498.57. Bank balance as of a year ago, when I did the report for the board, $9,820,887.06. And then I have the bank balance for you in 2020 also. Year-to-date net financials, $290,495. And then we do have the audited fund balance that was presented to the board last month from our auditors, $5,685,551. Can I answer any questions for the board?
Questions?
I do have the sales tax report for you this morning on the second page. Year to date, and this is up to date as of last week, we have currently received $481,962.77. And below I have last year's number for you. This time last year was $539,439.49. It is down just a little from this time last year.
Questions, comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
General business, back to that. Next on the agenda would be Laurel Springs. They're not present, so on down. Fairgrounds concession, Mr. Cole Edwards.
Morning. In y'all's package, you should have an RFP for operations of the concession stands at Fairgrounds. If you'll remember last year, we had entered into an agreement with a vendor to operate that, and that agreement ended on the 31st of last month. So this is an RFP set to be out for bid until the 4th of February, and then bids be open 4th of February. It's been reviewed by legal, I believe. No issues. Y'all have any questions or comments on it?
Questions? Moving on down, Fairgrounds paving.
Okay.
Chairman, we probably need a motion on that, on moving that document.
Motion to hear a second. Motion second, any further discussion? Not all in favor, raise your hand. 5-0, thank you.
And next, I handed you out this morning quotes for paving of the parking lot at the fairgrounds. Those were requested by the board. Reached out to 4 companies and got quotes from 2. Happy to answer any questions on those.
Any questions, comments?
Yes, I have a couple of questions, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I noticed that we've got 2 bids here, but they're different in the amount of asphalt that's going to be laid. We didn't specify how much asphalt we wanted, correct?
Correct.
So, one bid is going to do 2 inches, the other one's going to do 2.5. The other question that I have is, with these bids, are we looking to use county money or TDA money?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I think this was just a request from Commissioner Irwin, Bobby Irwin,
So it's
to
for
just see what it
informational
would,
purposes
just to
only.
see what it would cost us going into budget season.
Right, because we do have access, other than county funds. We can use TDA funds for this also that we need to take into consideration. All right, thank you.
Other questions?
Well, on kind of along that same line, I mean, with it being a difference in thickness, it'd be helpful if we had.
So, and in that
Comparison.
regard,
I know.
I'm
that-
not an engineer, and
I
I just
know.
left it up to whoever was giving the
My-
quotes
but
as
my-
to what they thought would be suffice.
Right, and they proposed what they thought.
Right.
But what I'm getting at is maybe ask them if the one would consider what their number would be if we did go with 2-inch, the one that's 2.5, or vice versa, just so we'd have maybe a true comparison. I know this gives us an idea, but and we've got a lot of work to do before we get anywhere, but still, I think that's a good question to kind of put out there to see where, or would it be? What's the thought?
I think what this does, first and foremost, is it gives an idea of what type of cost that we're looking at. And now it becomes, a question as to, at least in my mind, on weighing out, now that we have an idea of what the cost may be, is this something we want to proceed with, and in what time frame and how to? So my understanding was that we would basically get some estimates, which we have done, for budgetary purposes coming up. And then during the budgeting process, we would begin to dive into and see if this was in fact something worth the pursuit or not.
Yeah, that was my intention of getting these estimates, so that would give the finance committee some type of reference as to if it was a feasible project to be done this year, or if it had to be split over a couple years or whatever. But I think this just gives us a starting point, and when we get down to if it's something that we can do, then there would have to be a specific request for that bid, and that would be more specialized into if it's 2.5 inches, then compacted to 2 inches. I think most of it's put down at 2.5 and compacted to 2 inches. But that would be in a final bid process.
One other key piece, I think, going forward, working through this, would be what, when we say fairgrounds, it's all over the place. I mean, we might want to.
Well, and this area is specified, and it was specified to the folks giving the estimates. It's basically to the right. As you pull in the fairgrounds, to the right, in front of the barn, not behind the barn, around the black building, and that's, so both given estimates knew
Right, but
which area was.
That was kind of a verbal conversation, that what they were told. Was it marked off for them to see?
Wasn't marked off, but
Yeah,
I
think
went
we
and met
need-
them.
Which I know, working through it, but we just need to make sure that we're all on the same page of the area. we're
Again,
talking
I was
about.
just
I
just
got you.
working on a general idea
And I
of
thank you.
estimated
Yeah.
cost.
John?
Also, I think that we need to have a discussion of, instead of looking at county funds, whenever I mention that the TDA is authorized, I'm referring to section 1.2 of the statute establishing the TDA, and I quote, "The authority shall promote travel, tourism, and conventions in the county, sponsor tourist-related events and activities in the county, and finance tourist-related capital projects in the county." Now, we have used the black building, which is basically what we are looking at right now. We have used the black building for tourist-related events. So instead of the county paying for all this, with $200,000 plus in the TDA funds, I think that we should also entertain requesting funds from the TDA under this authority so that the county doesn't pay and the county taxpayers don't pay for all of this. So whenever we start talking about the finance committee, I think we've got to have a discussion at some point whether the county's going to fund all of it, or do we go to outside resources? Because those funds are there. That is why we set up a TDA, and we can request from that under the authority that I just cited. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The question?
Chairman,
Sir.
what Commissioner John is saying is good. I think that this time between today and budgeting, I think that would allow maybe Cole to, get some feel from the TDA on the application process and that kind of nature. What I also want to point out is this is a tool, this is just a tool to have. But if this is something that we feel that we need to pursue, in addition to the nice pretty black asphalt and the lines that get striped with it, we also need to look at an overall drainage plan for that facility as well, because once you take it to an impermeable surface, you've suddenly increased your groundwater capabilities, or surface water. So,
If I may, Mr. Chair, we've also got to take into consideration that's our backup courtroom. That looms in the back also, so these things that may never happen are still there. I never thought in my lifetime we'd have an earthquake in Allegheny County, but we still got to take these things into consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
Not on the agenda, but I just wanted to let y'all know that Thursday last week, Noah and myself, we completed the disc golf course. When I say completed, to get it playable, and we've actually already had people coming into town and playing on it. But that will be a continued work in progress, and we plan on having a ribbon cutting ceremony and that kind of thing for it, and you'll be advised when that's set.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole.
Long time coming.
That ribbon cutting down on the lower end, please.
The next up is a resolution of support for existing high country workforce development. This has came about our last meeting up there. What it is the state is doing studies, wanting to combine the smaller groups as ourselves with the larger cities. And there's 7 counties in our group up there, and everybody want to stay by ourselves within our own group like we have been. So they sent this resolution out. They want to get a resolution support, and I certainly support staying where we are with the high country council and all the cities and the counties that's in that region voted the same way, to stay within our existing country workforce.
Chairman, if I may give some background information on this.
Yes, sir.
Right now, there are over 20 districts in the state of North Carolina for workforce development. What the legislature is looking at is reducing that from over 20 down to, I believe it's 9. Now, we met as a consortium, and I am a member of that committee. We met in person in Boone in December, and it was the consensus of the workforce committee at that time that we would oppose this, and we have a resolution requesting that we do not do it, mainly because of the 7 counties that are involved. If we go to a organization that is combined of over 20, then our voices are reduced. And as I expressed to them right now, Allegheny County is the 5th smallest county in North Carolina. We are a very small fish in a small pond with the way the setup is right now. If we do go to the setup, then we will become a minnow in the ocean. Our voice will be very much reduced. The commission has a resolution of non-support of this, and I would recommend that we approve the recommendation.
I hear a motion.
Moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor? Raise your hand. 5-0. Thank you. Next on the agenda is GB Wagner Group contract amendment consideration. Mr. Wagner came last meeting and requesting a $1 per meal increase, I believe.
I don't have that email, but I think it was a 17%, if I remember correctly, on the meals, and which equates out to right at $1. A little more on the special meals.
Floor's open for discussion about this.
A number minimum of meals.
4 of 25. And by Nick's presentation this morning, you saw that all those numbers equated to about 22 as opposed to the 25.
What's the feeling of the board?
My question, what are we talking about doing? Are we talking about redoing the contract or putting it out for rebid, or what are our options?
I'll lead this part of the discussion if that's okay. You have an original agreement that was signed back in September of 19. That agreement is basically a 3-year agreement going until September the 18th of 2022. So you had a 3-year agreement that was entered into. I don't want to get into the language itself, but I'll just simplify by saying there have been a number of agreements that the county has been in that have came into question, at least during the 2 years that I've been here. This is an agreement that's, I guess I'll say is simple because it's 2 pages and it says what each party will do. Where in it does it talk about modifications or changes? Well, yeah, and I wasn't here during the initial time of this, and I'll speak for Heather, neither was she. But I know that we changed the name. I think it was done back in 2020 when we had a name change, or it could have been 21, but 2020. And those aren't really substance type things. This to me is a more substance type change or modification. Agreement doesn't identify the ability to do that. Doesn't say you can, doesn't say you can't. It's just not written that any changes or modifications can be agreed to or what have you. So, you know, it's probably not anything other than my thought is I certainly understand the difficulties that have came before as a result of having a 3-year agreement. Typically, when I look at contracts or agreements, there are, well, I'll call them thoughts, but they're actually in language that allow for changes to occur. I'll use your solid waste agreement, for example. They build in a CPI to allow for fuel charge changes. We all know fuel charges go up and down as well. This one doesn't do that. I'll use as a reference an agreement that was in place was the tax collection agreement with the town. That agreement was written similar to what this one was, in I say a simple form. It didn't allow for modifications or changes. You basically had it, and the only option you had was to terminate it. That's what we did. We went through the process of creating a new one, and ultimately now that one is no longer effective as well come year. With that in mind, and I'll certainly defer to Heather when it comes to the legal parts, but from my standpoint, the agreement was done in good faith by both parties. The agreement was signed in good faith by both parties with the numbers that it identifies. I understand that things change. It's not how the contract was written. And understand what that could relate to, but once we start making changes and once we start amending things, when do we stop? Or how do we stop? So I'm just looking out, what I feel is the important parts of the agreement itself, what it doesn't identify, and I'll defer to Heather for her thoughts on it as well.
We had this discussion, I think it was March of last year, when it came up, and there was a proposal to also change the contract. And at that time, my first inclination was exactly what county manager said, which is that the contract doesn't provide for amendments. Now, there haven't been amendments to this contract. What was mentioned at the last meeting by Mr. Wagner was that there were changes that were made the day that it was signed, so those would have been made before it was signed. Once it was signed, the only change was, I think, an entity had been created by Mr. Wagner. So that didn't alter the contract. It was just saying, hey, I'm me, but I'm doing my business under a different name. Can you please update that name? I'm sure that would have been for payment purposes or otherwise. So that's not an amendment per se. That's just a change in the entity for the same individual. At the time that we discussed this back in March of last year, one of the things that concerned me was that this contract came out of litigation. And the concern was, obviously, I don't want the county to get back into litigation in regards to changing this contract now in a way that potentially was litigated previously. So the county has historically bid this contract. Now, the litigation that Mr. Wagner referred to it was discussing whether or not it needed to be a bid contract, not that it was. So I tend to agree that the outcome of that litigation, excuse me, was that it doesn't have to be bid. The problem we have here is that this contract was bid. And without the contract saying that there is an allowable amendment that can be made, this was bid. You had other bidders that were involved. And I did go to the School of Government, and the School of Government was also concerned with the fact that this was a bid contract. Not that it required it to be, but it was. And because it was bid, were other bidders that potentially, if you go and now you amend the contract that was a bid contract arbitrarily without that being in the agreement, that could subject the county to liability for any of the prior bidders, because that was not mentioned to them, that this could be amended because it's not in the contract, and it wasn't part of that prior bid process. So there are several concerns, and it's the same concern that we had last March. Nothing's changed with that concern because the law hasn't changed in regards to either the interpretation of the contract or how it was actually implemented, which was by a bid. So the recommendation of the School of Government at that time was that if you're going to substantially change this contract, it needed to be rebid. And I think in this case, because of what's being asked for, that is a substantial change in this contract. And without there being the ability to just amend it on a vote of, the commissioners and with the Mr. Wagner, then that potentially subjects the county to liability without it being rebid at this time because it's substantial.
That being said, does they not qualify for the monies that came down for essential workers?
Now, that's something that potentially April might be able to answer, coming from the finance office and potentially county manager. I'm not really sure exactly how that's being implemented, so I can't really tell you legally from that standpoint.
I don't know if that's been looked into yet or not. Is that, would they qualify for an essential worker for the COVID monies that came down?
April,
Was talked about
I'm
a
not going
little
to
bit.
defer to you because I don't know that you know, but. What I would say to that, although we can't provide that answer, regardless, at least that would still be, not written in here. There's nothing written in this agreement that would allow for that, even if it was a qualification. So I don't have anything else to base that on at this point.
So because it's not in the contract, if he is eligible, it's because he's not in the contract, do nothing with it.
More of
I'm
a
a little
legal.
lost right there in what you just said.
Asking if any type of federal funding could be used to help compensate for this identified loss in revenue. The immediate response is, the changes that occur at least over the last few months, it seemed like daily, you very well could. And that's a modification to an agreement. And I'll defer back to what Heather is saying, that I don't know that that's something we can do.
That question was asked at the last meeting, I believe, when his presentation about the COVID monies for essential workers, and I was just wondering if we'd got into that, but you said the final draft has come out. Right, so.
I know you have your hand raised, but I will mention one thing. One thing that the School of Government said last year, that the use of federal funds potentially triggers federal procurement rules, and that may trigger something else that it's unintended. So we'd have to be very careful how we did that, because that may throw us into something that we think, oh, well, under one rule, we might be allowed to do it. But then under another rule that would affect us if we were using federal money for this type of situation, that might throw us into another rule and might be a problem. So unfortunately, it may be easy to say, well, yeah, we might be able to do that under one part, but not necessarily under the other. And that would be a concern that I have, because that was mentioned last March.
How do we get a legitimate final answer that where we could help Garrison, in some way? I mean, I know that these rules are fluctuating up and down, but at some point, I would think somebody in the government above us would be able to say, yes, you can, or no, you can't.
I think April right now is doing classes, education classes on the final rule. So I'm not really sure exactly where that's going to put us on a lot of things. So until we know exactly what that entails, I'm not sure we can make any determination as to additional uses of those funds until we know for sure we're allowed. Even with it maybe being a multiple final rule, I think we need to wait and see exactly on that end what comes out of the education that April's doing right now to make that determination.
Mr. Chair, just for information, State of North Carolina, Legislature of North Carolina has come out with a grant program specifically for restaurants, food vendors. But there's a caveat in there that if the restaurant or the vendor took the PPP money, they cannot apply for the grants. State of North Carolina has something set up, and it is specifically for restaurants and things of that nature. And we're chasing it, we're a dog chasing its tail right now until Treasury submits the final rule. And that's where April has had her hands tied. Treasury has never issued the final rule, and all these counties throughout the United States are not going to do anything, because if we do something and the final rule says you can't do that, they want the money back. Am I not correct, April? Now, April, I have been on conferences on Zoom conferences with April being present. She's asked specific questions, and you talking about tap dancing. they're prima ballerinas whenever these things come up. You cannot, it's like asking a question and they are trying to nail Jell-O to the wall. So Lord, we've got until December of 2024 for this money to be spent. We probably won't get a final rule from Treasury until December the 1st of 2024, and the money's got to be spent by the 31st. The way things are going right now, we're 2 years into this mess.
There's also an availability for an extension out to 2026. So to go back to what Commissioner Bobby had asked, this board, if you're not talking about, I call it ARPA funding, which is the funding process that we're in now, the COVID money's gone, ARPA funding, if you take that to the side, you as a board have the ability to alter it. If you want to provide some type of county funding towards that, you have that ability, at least in theory. You don't have to base it on the ARPA funds. You could do it yourself if that's the approach you want to take. But I caution you, going back to what Heather has identified, the ability exists for the governing body to make an alteration or an amendment. But I think you really need to process what has been said before you consider that.
I believe in contracts. I think the contract, any contract that the county enters into, whether it's good for us or good for the other party, ought to be held to that contract. But at the same time, this world has been hit by COVID, and that's changed a lot of contracts in theory, but it hasn't changed that contract in writing. And I know restaurant businesses, Bill and I've been dabbled in that before, and there is an increase in the food cost. And it's heartbreaking to me that we can't legally do something to help that situation without putting the county into legal liability. And I don't know if there's this PPP money. I don't know if there's something creative that can be done, to help. But it's, he's got this contract for another 9 months. I don't know how much longer he can hold on. I don't know if it's the quality of the food, it's the type of food that it's being bought. I think 17% is a very high number. I don't know. I just don't know how we can help him without putting the county in legal jeopardy. But if there's some way, sort of hook or crook or backdoor way to help him, I think we should look at all options. It's just a different time than what this country's ever been in before. And nobody writing a contract 3 years ago could project that China would do this to the world and cause the world to really change. All I got.
Michelle?
I agree with Bobby. I mean, he's one of our local small businesses, and, we're in the middle of a pandemic. It sounds like correct me if I'm wrong, legal, but it sounds like the most appropriate way to manage this would be to allow him to give notice of his contract in his current contract, and then he rebid. Is that correct? but that also opens up the possibility of other people bidding on that contract too. Correct statement?
And there's also the consideration from the county to determine whether they want to rebid. Because in the litigation, it was determined the type of contract that it is, it doesn't require it to be bid. So I know historically it has been, and that's a consideration that the commissioners should have in regards to this going forward. Do you want this to be a bid contract? So that would be number one. Not that it has to be. Obviously, if the exit provision was exercised in the contract, then, you can start over again, and it's either bid or not. And that's a determination that you guys would have to make as to how you want to go forward in handling this. I think generally the county has bid most of the contracts, if not all of them, that they issue, unless it's under the threshold required by statute. So, if you're going to continue to bid, then yes, that's exactly the scenario that we'd be talking about.
He's got 9 months left in his current contract. So I would like to see us do some creative thinking to kind of help him out in the process. A lot of the things that have happened, well, they're not his fault. I mean, food prices and a pandemic. I'm sure he has staff problems just like everybody else has. So,
I call the situation he's in a victim of the times. We've all been there. That big housing crisis here a few years ago, a lot of people got caught. But I too think we need to, if there's any way possible, to try to help him to, I'd be for that if there's any way legally possible. And if they don't, you don't have much choice if you're losing money to sometimes bid it or whatever. I think if there's any way possible, we need to look at trying to help him out. I know 2 or 3 of his other entities that he serves has helped him out. I mean, about the contract, if he's got a contract or what with them, but they stepped up and have helped him out. And helping control the food costs is an increased cost.
And the only thing I would say, unfortunately for that, is we're a government entity, and we're subject to different rules and regulations than a private entity. So we have a higher threshold that we have to follow. So they're not apples to apples. We're kind of apples to oranges where that's concerned.
How soon do you think you will know? Do you have any idea? Peace.
There are actually things out there now where we need to get documents to the board if there's a potential of doing certain things with this money. There's upfront documents that need to be approved by the board, and I've got to get that information to Heather because I've just gotten some of that information last week. Uniform guidance and things like that, they have to be taken into consideration with federal money. And that does put us in a different category of things, and even the reporting and things of that nature, things that I'm not aware of yet. So we need some time to look at it now that we do have a final rule. And the final rule is actually not in effect until April the 1st, I believe. So we need a little time.
What does the board wish to do?
I have a question for council. Right now, we can either modify or, amend. Or Garrison can cancel the contract with 30 days' notice. The county can cancel the contract with 30 days' notice. If we do that, then the next question that we have to do as county commissioners is make a decision, are we going to bid or not? Correct?
Yes.
And if we decide to go to bid, we've got to go to bid, and that would be it. But with 30 days' notice, that means we've got to jump through the hoops, get the bid out there and select.
Yes, because who else, right now, who's going to be preparing the meals? You know,
Right.
how's that going to work? If you don't have a contractor, you know, that is currently under a contract with the county, then how are you then going to provide the required services for those meals for inmates? That may, as the video that was played at the last meeting, you know, obviously that is a concern with any service that's being provided. If you don't have a contract to be able to provide the service, then you've got an issue. And how can you house inmates if you can't provide a required service to them? So, yeah, that is a concern.
Second question. What is our legal jeopardy if we amend this contract? Now, you alluded, in my opinion, that we may be subject to suit again if we amend this contract.
Yes, because the School of Government said this was a bid contract. Because it was, you are now in that situation where you can't just go back and amend. I mean, besides the fact that the contract doesn't have that provision in it allowing that to be the case, the issue is this was a bid. Not that it has to be, or that it, you know, in the future you don't have to bid if you don't want to. It was a bid contract. That is the problem we have here in saying that you can just randomly go back and between the parties making an agreement to amend. That wasn't something that was in the bid before that alerted those other bidders that this could be a possibility, which is a liability going forward if you just decide to amend it. And that would open the county up to suit potentially from other bidders or even the citizens of this community, because you are now potentially detrimenting those citizens because now you're offering more money on something that you didn't get a bid on and you didn't previously advise either the public or those prior bidders that would be a possibility. So there's your liability, and it's there because it was a bid contract.
We could give him notice today of terminating the contract for 30 days, and then go ahead and we don't have to take bids again, correct? Is that what you're saying? We could write a new contract with 22 inmates a day on average, is what Mr. Hawks said, Officer Hawks said. Could we do something like that?
Well, I wouldn't recommend from a legal standpoint the county canceling a contract that is viable, because that puts you in a position now where you might have a problem going forward providing services to the inmates that are actually housed here. And I'm not really sure how in 30 days you're going to be able to comply with that requirement. So that makes no sense. I wouldn't recommend that from a legal standpoint because of that situation. I mean, the county has a valid contract, so there's no reason for the county to terminate that. You know, on the other end, obviously, that's an option because the contract is what it is and it says what it says in regards to that ability to be able to terminate. So, I mean, it's possible. And going forward, I think from the litigation and from what the School of Government has said, that is not a contract because of the type of service being provided that has to be bid. It's just something that the county has generally always done with their contracts. And I think that's probably because they wanted transparency with the community and to potentially prevent there being a possibility of the idea or thought that there might be contracts being given out, you know, preferentially to someone that you know, you might know. And so in order to prevent that from happening, most of these contracts have just been bid. And that probably keeps it as honest and fair as possible in regards to the outcome, especially for the county.
Just trying to find some kind of middle ground to keep the county out of any possible legal action, but also trying to help him, because I'm sympathetic to his problem with everything that has happened. So I think that's kind of where we're all at.
We are. He's gave good service. He hasn't missed a day. It's worth, that's to be said also. Very, very few complaints. He follows the state's recommendations on the dietitian, all the food that's required and all that, and the county, a good job. To me, like the only option we got legally where that is left up to Mr. Wagner. Come on up.
Good morning. How's everybody doing today? If that's the only way that we see forward, then we're prepared to do that. I've got written notice right here in my hands, ready to go. Prefer an amendment, but if your hands are tied, I understand. However, the one option that I can't continue with is to continue to lose money on the contract. So with that being said, that's kind of how I see how we have to move forward. If there are no other options available, I'm going to have to exercise the 30-day clause.
Expect you to lose money.
And
That's just where we're at legally.
The contract ended this year anyways, so whether it's rebid or not, we would have had to navigate that at some point regardless.
I would ask a question of you. Would you agree to provide the meals until the contract, a new contract after the bidding is in place?
We'd have to have, I mean, I'm not going to put you in a precarious position, but we would have to have a discussion about that.
We not, since the contract would be null and void after 30 days, could we not have an agreement with him that we would provide, that he would provide meals at a cost, certain amount, until we sign a new contract? That way we've got someone providing the meals. After 30 days, you could charge what you feel is a reasonable amount until the contract is bid. If you win the bid, then we're ready to go.
I don't think that would be an issue. I'd obviously just want to double check with the School of Government because we're kind of doing some interesting things to, weave around, and I'd want to make sure we weren't running afoul of anything in order to do that. Because the concern I would have is that you're switching from a bid to just a contract, and then if you're going right back to a bid again, you see what I'm saying? I don't want that to be an issue, and I would want to make sure that we weren't causing any issues because we're flip-flopping back and forth.
May, where to point to where Wagner needs to action, I think, allow that to happen, and then circumstances work out, and hopefully it works out for the best, but I don't.
We have 30 days so that we can ask the questions, and hopefully we can get an answer and continue on.
There's one thing for sure, they've got to be fed over there, so, or we lose the feds anyway.
I think one thing I'd like to add before I kind of close out here is that if you do decide to have a bid process for this, there are a lot more factors that you're going to have to take into place other than just those 14 requirements that were necessary in the beginning. Because not only have we faced the increase in food costs, we also have to have reserve staff on standby. I also have to have a reserve kitchen on standby. I also have to have reserve food on standby. So in case any of our staff come in contact with somebody who's been a positive COVID test, we have to shut down our current location and do a deep clean, and we have to wait 48 hours before we could go back to that main facility. So we have an agreement in place with one of our other contract relationships where we've got food on standby ready to go. So whether we face a power outage, whether we face a COVID exposure, nobody's going to miss a meal because the patients in our hospital and the people in the jail can't miss a meal. That's just unacceptable. So I think, look, if you do decide to rebid it, I think that's something that's absolutely necessary, because it's a very real cost for me to have 2 people on standby. Say I have COVID, I've got to have somebody in place who can come in and work for me for at least 10 days.
And I would point out that on the Council of Aging. Normally, those meals come from the high school. Whenever they shut down, this man stepped up in as little as 1 hour's notification, if I'm correct, and he has always performed.
It was good service. Bobby?
Just a general question. How much have your food cost increased in the last 6 months or whatever? Just your food?
Just the food alone, when you look at quarter four of 2019 compared to quarter four of 2021, which are the most complete and accurate measurements I can give you, it's a 33.93% increase, because you look at our average cost per case, that's kind of like what I'm buying across the board, was $27.99. We'll call it $28 even in 2019. Now it's in the range of $37.50, and it continues to rise, and I don't think it's going to go down anytime soon.
So percentage-wise, do you have a rough idea of what your food costs, not your overhead, your food costs have increased from your suppliers?
That's about 34%.
Thank you.
Anything else?
May I ask a question? I just need the quick history, because I wasn't here when it, who put this bid package together? Was it approved by the Board of Commissioners, or how's this been done? I just need a history lesson.
Approved by the board. The contract?
It's the bid package, because we're talking about components of the bid and not, who put that together?
I could address that. Was
Would have been from the managers, out of the manager's office
James.
to the board.
I don't think it's right either. From what I've understood, the sheriff's office has always put this thing out. Which was why I was asking if it was approved by the board. I don't know.
Board had to approve the contract.
The package was
Right.
It seems to me like we're at a point where we're sort of waiting on April. I think April and Heather and Michael get together and see what's going to happen in the next few weeks or 30 days or whatever, if we get a final answer from the government about the PPP money. You know, that could be an easy way to solve some of the problems.
I can't use PPP money. So we already had, I'll kind of explain to you how we can't qualify for any more of those grants, whether if it's coming from the federal government or the state of North Carolina, because in round one, you didn't have to show, in round one of PPP funding, you did not have to show any kind of decline in revenue, okay? So they're only looking at your top line numbers. It does not matter if you had a decrease in profit, because you look at how much money our restaurant was pulling in before we took on the contracts with the jail and the hospital. We can't show a decline in revenue, even though we could show a decline in profit. We can't show a decline in revenue because that other money was coming in 2020 and it was not there in 2019. It simply didn't exist. So when the second round of PPP funding came out from the federal government, we were excluded from receiving anything like that because we couldn't show a 25% decline in gross revenue. So it's just looking at your top line. And the same thing with the restaurant revitalization grant in North Carolina. You can't qualify for that unless you can show a top line decrease of 25% or greater. That's kind of why the hands are tied there. And it's public record how much we received. I'll save you the time from looking at it. We received roughly $18,000 in the beginning. That was enough to pay our staff for, I think it was a 10-week period. Just to add on top of that, since the food cost has, continued to rise and our population has fell, in order to keep the staff that we do have, which is necessary, I haven't been able to cut a paycheck from our books since the first week of December, or the last week of November. So this is my third Christmas working for this contract, but this is the first Christmas I worked it for free.
Any other questions? Point.
If we do decide to, terminate the contract, do you feel as a board that you would rebid the contract, or would you feel like you'd handle it as any other service contract, that you have in-house and just kind of go with the most responsible bid or go with a request for proposal would be my question.
What's the feeling of the board?
I would defer to the managers and work on that whenever he gets time to get to it, and I don't know that you probably are able to answer that right.
I hope in the 2 years that I've been here that I've demonstrated the spirit of competition and the ability to follow procurement. So if you're asking me, I would say I don't think it's something you just award without providing for that spirit of competition and that type of process. I don't mean it wrong. It'll get misinterpreted, but I don't like whoever to have the feeling that we're just handing out abilities. I think there ought to be a process to it.
I'm not saying I disagree with that, because we would have never had the ability to bid on the contract if it wasn't bid in the first place. So I just wanted to know, where you stood.
Then we got to move quickly.
Yep, it is, certainly is.
What I would ask is if it is, because nobody has a crystal ball, and we've said that 3 or 4 different ways already, but to have in your minds that the three of us can get together and figure out if it's going to be something to use ARPA funds on, I would tell you simply that anything that you commit ARPA funds to, in the back of your mind, you need to be prepared to pony up for just in case, because that's just the way this thing works. But what I would ask the board is if it is looming that a notice of termination is forthcoming from the provider at this point, and it sounds like it is. I don't want to speak for it, or I haven't received it, but if that is the case, I think this board needs to go ahead and authorize the ability to advertise for the service once that receipt of termination is received. And, it sounds like that in the past, the sheriff's office has been a key component in putting together the information for that packet. I see that as being no different. But to get ahead of that, and we've already identified the time restraints, I think that should that receipt of termination occur, we need to already have the ability to put the next one out to speed that process up.
Sir, you stated you was prepared to terminate. Still, what Mr. Carter just said, let's move on, get ready to.
Do we need a motion for that, Mr. Chair?
We
A motion that we authorize the county manager to do an RFP for services contingent upon receipt of cancellation of the current contract holder.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If Not all in favor, raise your hand. Opposed?
Thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you, Garrison. Next up is General Fund Budget Amendment, number 6. April Ham.
Just have one small budget amendment for DSS this morning. It's a $200 donation that needs to be put in DSS unrestricted donations.
Got a motion?
Second.
Motion second, any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand.
Thank you.
Next, Rita Miller, Tax Administrator.
Good morning. Well, it looks like first on the agenda is the good cause policy that I spoke with you about at the last meeting. Attorney Klein and I have had a chance to look over that, and what we came up with is in your packet. Consideration.
Question, is this something Heather, you all and Heather have worked over and
You can see my comments, the two things that I've added were in yellow. And the only thing I don't think we incorporated and we might want to revisit would have been, John, you said something at the last meeting about military, and I'm not sure, did we cover that?
It is in there because the way, I can't remember the exact terminology, and I'm looking through right now. Yes. Active duty military deployment or reservist deployment, which would cover that, ma'am. Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Got a motion, here a second.
Second.
Motion is second, any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. 5-0.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Request for release of solid fund, refund of solid waste.
The three, if there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Do you have any questions?
Y'all were in error, billed in error is what they're all saying, so.
Yes,
okay.
yes, they were.
Motion to approve if you need.
Motion, here a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Not all in favor? 5-0.
And the next thing was the consent agenda, and at the time I created the document, I didn't have the license plate information. So the number of transactions was 1,142, and the compensation was $3,954.38.
Second.
Motion is second, any discussion? All in favor? 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. County Manager.
Okay. Just a couple. First of all, you'll see there's a building inspection report in your packet. I encourage you to look that over. I was just sitting here trying to do some quick math, but with the decision and the receipt of the notice of termination on the jail mills, 30 days runs out about February the 16th. So once we get the RFP together and out, the likelihood exists for there to be a special called meeting sometime that week, because you do not meet again until the following Monday. So that also, going back to some of the earlier talk that David provided. I just wanted to openly appreciate everyone who gets out and works while the rest of us don't sometimes. And that gets overlooked a little bit, and I'm not singling out a particular department because there are many departments that do that, but I do want to openly appreciate those that get out and take those steps. The next thing is, if you think back a couple of meetings, I'd asked the board to put out an RFQ for architect and engineering services. One for a facility study on the courthouse, and two on the design of the demo and reconstruction of an entranceway to 90 South Main. I'd like to say that this past Friday was the deadline, and I received 5 submittals from different engineer architecture firms. So I think we had a really good interest in those 2 projects. What I would like to ask from the board is, part of the RFQ process involves obviously receiving those qualifications, but also reviewing the proposals, ranking the firms, ultimately interviewing firms in order to get to a selection. And the venue I would like to use in that process would be the Courthouse Committee, which exists of both Bobby and John Irwin. And what I would like to do is I'll put together a score sheet that we can all use to look at those, go through the rankings, kind of do the legwork, let the committee do the legwork, bring back a recommendation to the full board, and if we need to discuss it in more detail, we can. But I would like to use the Courthouse Committee as that outlet, if that is acceptable.
Motion on that?
Discussion, if there's a different idea, but that's...
Is the floor for discussion?
Fine with me.
Everybody good?
No problem.
I will check dates with you guys, and of course David, he'll be in on that as well, but try to coincide that within at least the next couple of weeks so that we can begin that process. Other than that, I don't have anything else today.
Thank you. Next, commissioner comments. Mr. Mark?
I didn't say a lot through that conversation we just had, but I would like to publicly thank Garrison for his service and commitment, and hiring with Nick and some of his office has to do that he can help, but you know, contract is a contract, and obviously we'll have probably some different wording going forward the next time, so hopefully we learn. And just kind of to echo what Mr. Carter said as far as the folks outside, and of course I want to go back to the Nick's report and the sheriff's office and the sheriff, you know, and all that they do for the county, and a lot of it's weather, regardless of the weather, they still have to do it. But also our maintenance, our DOT crews, all of our emergency personnel who are out in this awful weather, who still have a job to do regardless of the weather. Our heart goes out to them, and our thoughts and prayers, because they are in certainly some trying conditions. I saw a picture of a state truck overturned on 18. Get out there, and they're doing it to serve the people, and we appreciate all those that are.
I like, just like what Mark said, I had DOT, I think, has done a fabulous job on the roads. Our county maintenance has done an outstanding job getting the parking lots and sidewalks and all that, the transfer facility, all that ready for people to use. I think they need to have a good pat on the back, and I appreciate, and I'm sure the citizens appreciate all they do. The other thing is, I think that I'm not sure who's sponsoring it. I think it's the Fairgrounds with the wildlife resource officer. There's going to be a coyote hunt in February for 2 days. It's a team event. I think they can get the information out of the Allegheny News, but I hope it's a success, and I'd like to see more than just 2 days added to it. And I think there's a good cash prize for the winning team. So I just wish them good luck. That's all. Thank you.
John?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been an interesting 2 weeks. It's been a time of reflection and looking back. And the one thing that I've come to realize is we've got some misconceptions. And one of the things that I want to point out to my fellow commissioners and also to the public, especially the public, is Session Law 2011. This is House Bill 96. What we're dealing with is the Allegheny County occupancy tax. I brought it up, and I believe this is the underlying problem that we have whenever we started looking at the TDA. Now, under this legislation, which I refer to as law, distribution, use of tax revenue. We have heard that 1/3 of the revenue money goes to the Chamber of Commerce. Under the law, and I'm going to read, quote, when the Allegheny County Board of Commissioners adopts a resolution levying a room occupancy tax under subsection A1 of this section, the resolution shall require that the county remit on a quarterly basis 100% of the net proceeds of the occupancy tax levied under this act to the Allegheny County Tourism Development Authority. The authority shall use at least 2/3 of the funds remitted to it under this subsection to promote travel and tourism in Allegheny County, and shall use the remainder for tourism-related expenditures. Now, the Act also specifies, gives us a definition. The definition, promote travel and tourism, to advertise or market an area or activity, publish and distribute pamphlets and other materials, conduct market research, or engage in similar promotional activities that attracts tourists or business travelers to the area. The term includes administrative expenses incurred in engaging in the listed activities, unquote. Now, these are very, very specific. Also, it tells us how many people are going to be on a board that will oversee this. And I'm not going to go into it because we get into 1/3 and the things that come into it. But it also specifies what people must be doing whenever they are going to sit on the board. Now, I have objected saying that one member of the board does not meet the qualifications as the board is comprised right now. Whenever I went to the Department of Treasury informed me that, yes, that this is a binding, but the arbitrator is the County Board of Commissioners. It is in our bucket. So, even though we look at legislation, I consider it a law, this is directive, I'm not going to get anywhere. This board is not going to follow law. And I can prove it. Look at the first telephone contract vote. State statute says that we have got to accept the lowest bid. We turned it down. And by doing that, we put this county in jeopardy. Now, today I pointed out that we can go to the TDA and we can request that they help fund the paving up there at the Black Building. The authority shall promote travel, tourism, and conventions in the county, sponsor tourism-related events and activity in the county, and finance tourist-related capital projects in the county. So this is another source. I believe that we have not looked at our resources, the things that we can do. And why am I bringing this up now? Bobby, there's $200,000 in the TDA fund right now. That's a lot of money. Now, yes, I am gruff. Yes, I am rough. Whenever I ask a question, someone tries to evade or talk around it, I get frustrated. My background's in the military. We request, we expect prompt answers. We don't want anybody tap dancing around because we've got things. Whenever we are actually doing what we are paid to do, things are pretty bad, and we have got to act on the information that's provided, and we can't second guess. So if I've ruffled some feathers, well and good. But I also know one thing. The axiom in the military has been since the time of the Greeks. Kill the messenger, you kill the message. The messenger's not dead. Hopefully he lives for another 3 years when my term is up. But I will tell you this, recent activities and what's happened, I realize I'm close to discovering something that people don't want me to bring out, and I'm going to run for re-election in 2024. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish everyone a happy new year. I thank Garrison for his commitment to the community, what he has done, and the work of the EMS people that have been out there. Whenever the ambulance call comes in, they've gone. Whenever the snow's deep and it's piling up, our DOT, our county workers, it shows the dedication that you have to your job. You leave your families, you leave that nice warm hearth, and you get out there and you do it. That's what we expect of you. And that's what you perform. So God bless every one of you. Please be safe in this cold weather, and have a good day.
Thank you, Michelle.
Too, would like to thank all the first responders, our maintenance crew, we have a great sheriff's department. We're very fortunate to have those folks on board. And again, thank Garrison. He's delivered. He's doing a great job, and I hope that we can work something out in the future with him, because I just hate that this has been, that our hands have been tied through this contract, but we cannot put the county in jeopardy of another legal action. So those things that hopefully we can work through to get a good positive.
Thank you. I just extend the same about all the 911, the police services, and fire and rescue. They've done a superb job, each and every one of them, and Blue Ridge Electric, Blue Ridge Energies, done a great job. DOT done another great job. And I too want to thank Garrison, because I've kept up with Garrison for the length of time he's been here, and he has served this county well and done everything that was asked of him. And maybe too, something can be worked out from here on in. The other thing I want to take just a second to discuss is the Affordable Connectivity Program. This is a new program and comes down from the Biden infrastructure bill. And it's income-based, and it's not going to be hard for people to meet the income level. I think a lot of folks will get a lot of benefit from this, and it pays $30 a month on your internet service, and it's a one-time pay. That's monthly. There's a one-time pay of $100 for a computer or tablet. And the folks over at the library is going to help us out with that. You can do it online, or you can fill out an application, and they've agreed to help both ways. And Skyline Telephone is also, I think, offered to help somewhat get the paperwork filled up. I think that could be a great use to Allegheny County, with a lot of people, and it is income-based, and we have the web addresses and everything at the library, and we'll be glad to help you out over there. That's all I have. Heather, y'all have any? They done been.
You've already gone.
Yeah.
You slept through that part.
We started on that Saturday.
I heard you. I want to say thanks to Blue Ridge Energy because we had a, power outage on Sunday, and that weather was disgusting, and I think we were the only ones out in Laurel Springs that lost power. You could look at the little dot and see that we were the only ones. And 2 hours, you can almost guarantee that within 2 hours, your electricity is going to be back on. And they could not get their truck up our driveway, so they got out of their truck and they walked up the driveway through those ridiculous drifts, and they got our electricity back on. So I want to thank them very much for coming out in disgusting weather and making sure we had power.
Your road is a challenge without snow and ice.
Michael, anything further? If not, entertain a motion.
Make a motion.
Motion
Nothing
is,
from Drew?
she's speechless, she's hungry. Motion is second, all in favor? Thank you.